You're no longer aligned with our development direction. Hearing that felt like someone had just pulled the plug from a life support machine. Just 10 minutes earlier, I was still the one overseeing the entire tech infrastructure of a major medical center in Des Moines, Iowa. Over 300 beds and thousands of surgeries each year. Now I was standing in a conference room where everything played out like an ordinary meeting, minus the morning coffee. The man in front of me, Preston Wade, adjusted his glasses and turned toward his framed MBA on the wall. I swear he never looked me in the eye the entire meeting. We're moving toward the future, one where technology must be agile, efficient, and younger. Preston had only been CEO for less than 5 months. 43 years old, formerly managed a chain of private clinics in Phoenix. No medical background, but great at trimming budgets and building flashy slide decks. And me, a 59-year-old guy, got labeled as legacy in need of restructuring. The meeting lasted exactly 20 minutes. Next to Preston sat a young guy named Carter, their newly hired tech consultant. He was glued to his phone the entire time, occasionally nodding when Preston emphasized the term digital transformation. "We've prepared a severance package," Preston continued, sliding an envelope across the table. 2 months' salary, full confidentiality terms, and we hope you'll cooperate. I didn't respond. I just stared at the control panel behind him, the one I'd designed and rebuilt from the ground up in the early days. Not once had that system failed. Not during the malware attack in 2017. Not when the local power grid collapsed in the snowstorm of 2021. Not even when I lost half my team and kept things running by working more than 80 hours a week. "Security will escort you to your office to collect your things," Preston said as he stood up, buttoning his suit like he just wrapped up a courteous transaction. I unclipped my ID badge and placed it on the table. "Admin accounts are all encrypted and stored securely. Root password is in safe slot 4. Documentation's in the internal folder," I said. For the first time that morning, he smiled. "I'm glad you're staying professional till the end, Stephen." I turned to Carter, who was eyeing my chair like it had already been his for weeks. In 3 weeks of evaluation, he hadn't asked me a single question about how our system worked. Didn't even look at the architecture files I had sent. "Anything else you want to say?" Preston asked. I had hundreds of things I could have said. The patches I custom built, the manual bridges between the old prescription module and patient records, the recovery protocols I used when the software crashed at 3 a.m. But I just shook my head. No, nothing else. I walked out of the room where I had once pitched countless system upgrades, past the surgical coordination desk, where I'd rebuilt the database overnight after a major corruption. I didn't look back. It felt like I'd been evicted from a house I'd poured my life into. The parking lot was as empty as I felt. I placed my box on the passenger seat. A few family photos, some gifts from the nursing staff, and a faded ceramic mug stained by too many sleepless nights. They didn't want my knowledge. They wanted me gone. And 7 days later, they'd learn the price of that choice. I used to work at a cybersecurity firm in Minneapolis, where million-dollar contracts were sealed with cold handshakes between CEOs and lawyers. Solid income, full benefits, I even had stock options. But life doesn't ask for your approval before flipping everything upside down. Her name was Clara, the woman who turned a one-bedroom apartment into a true home. The one who packed my sandwich every morning, slipping in a sticky note reminding me of the dentist appointment I kept postponing. When Clara was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 51, it yanked me straight out of reality. The company insurance didn't cover her advanced treatment. I still remember the HR conversation, a monotone voice telling me my plan didn't include targeted therapy and that Mayo Clinic bills would be out of pocket. I quit that week. No one understood why someone like me would walk away from a 6-figure position, but I knew exactly why. I needed a place with stronger healthcare benefits, not fancier oak-paneled boardrooms. Central Valley Hospital in Des Moines was looking for a systems administrator to replace a retiring veteran. The pay was less than half what I earned before, but they offered premium coverage and full oncology support. I accepted the job 2 days after the interview. The first few months were a maze of outdated machines, patchwork databases, and barely functioning servers. There was no unified platform, everything ran on duct tape code. But I didn't care. As my fingers typed fixes into the terminal, My mind was with Clara, sitting by the treatment room window, reading a half-finished novel. I never took leave, couldn't afford to be away long. One system glitch and automated medication or treatment notes might go down. I worked nights, stayed through weekends, brought my laptop home to check logs before sunrise. Clara always understood. When I came home late, she warmed dinner and whispered, "They need you too, just like I do." During the winter blackout of 2021, the entire city went dark. I drove through a snowstorm to the hospital because only I knew which backup server could handle the load. When departments were calling non-stop, unable to access patient files, I sat shivering in the cold server room, manually patching static IPs into place. Not once did I let the system go down for more than 4 minutes. At the height of the COVID pandemic, when most IT staff were working remotely, I remained on site. Sometimes hitting the restart button at just the right moment can save a life. The malware attack? That was back in 2019. A spoofed email from HR included an Excel file labeled Holiday Bonus List. A new employee opened it. Within 20 minutes, the system began auto-encrypting. I caught it, segmented the internal network, isolated critical servers, and used a manual ghost image I had pre-installed. The entire system was restored in 7 hours. No data was lost. No patients were affected. Clara passed away that September. I had just patched the cardiac monitoring software when the nursing facility called. I didn't get to say goodbye. No one blamed me, but I couldn't forgive myself. After the funeral, I returned to the hospital earlier than planned, not because the pain was gone, but because I needed to keep doing what she believed I was meant to do. Protect life, even in silence. No one patted my back when the system ran smoothly. No one threw small parties each time I prevented a data disaster. But that never stopped me from showing up. They didn't see me in hospital press releases, but I was always there, in every data packet moving between doctor and nurse, in every click searching patient history before a surgery began. Even on the day Preston Wade signed my termination, I still believed what I did mattered. I was just wrong about one thing, that the value of it lay in the hands of people who never truly needed it. I still remember the day Mr. Thompson placed his hand on my shoulder, nodded gently, and said, "If anything keeps this place running every day, Stephen, it's you." He was the CEO of Central Valley for nearly 2 decades. A man who never made a decision without consulting both tech and clinical teams. He retired at the end of last fall after undergoing heart surgery. The farewell was modest but warm. He shook my hand firmly, eyes full of trust. "Take care of the system. You understand it better than anyone." What I didn't know was that handshake marked the end of stability. 2 weeks later, Preston Wade showed up in an expensive suit and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Word had it he once reinvented a large hospital network in the Southwest through bold tech strategies. But what made me uneasy wasn't his resume. It was the people he brought with him. A consulting group from Helix Strategic Solutions began moving through the hospital like they owned it. Leading them was Carter, the young man who sat silently during my termination meeting, dressed in Helix-branded polos, always carrying iPads and speaking non-stop in phrases like end-to-end digital transformation, cloud integration, and real-time data unification. They asked me for the system map. I handed them the detailed architecture I'd maintained and updated weekly for over 10 years. No feedback. They redrew it on a whiteboard with basic blocks and flashy arrows, like they were designing a mobile app. I tried to explain our medication management system was linked to an old platform from a now-defunct vendor, only accessible via a custom API I'd built in Python. The primary server ran on a proprietary patch, incompatible with the virtualization environment they wanted. Carter nodded, took no notes. A moment later, he asked, "So why not just replace the whole platform?" I let out a dry laugh. Because if we do, 10 years worth of clinical data becomes unreadable, unless you've got a plan to convert every byte. His response was a shrug and a tone-deaf joke. There's a first time for everything. From then on, Helix reports began flooding the executive room. They labeled my system a patchwork of outdated components and pushed to replace everything with a Helix-designed platform. I quietly reviewed the system diagrams they submitted to the board. They ignored at least 8 critical support programs still in active use. No integration for the lab to inpatient data flow. The OB monitoring system wasn't even mentioned. I marked every omission in red, sent detailed feedback via email. No one replied. One Friday afternoon, I saw three unfamiliar men measuring my office. When I asked, one looked away and muttered, "Just planning a workspace update." That night, I opened my laptop and updated my LinkedIn profile. I'd never seriously thought of leaving, but there was something in Carter's look that told me with certainty they weren't planning to keep any part of me, even if I was the backbone of the entire hospital. The following week, I sat through a meeting about the modernization roadmap. Preston spoke with fervor, praising Helix's vision and emphasizing benefits like reduced labor costs, full automation, and eliminating manual workflows. Not a single word about patients. Not one mention of data security. I sat in the back, watching the flickering light of the projector as it displayed slide after slide. What I had built wasn't being replaced because it failed. It was being erased because it didn't sparkle in a quarterly report. Carter looked back at me, smiling faintly, as if he knew the game was already decided. I said nothing. But by then, I had already started gathering everything: system logs, network diagrams, update journals, and internal warnings that had been ignored. Not to fight them, but to prepare for what they hadn't seen coming. Because there are things no cloud-based system, no matter how advanced, can ever replace: the memory of the one who lived inside it. When I was officially let go, what bothered me most wasn't the loss of income or title. It was the sense that something was deeply wrong but not yet visible. Everything had happened too neatly, too clean, like it had all been scripted in advance. 3 days later, while cleaning out the garage, I found the black USB drive I often used for private backups. I plugged it into my laptop in the kitchen, expecting nothing more than a few technical files. But when I opened the meeting_notes folder, one audio file immediately caught my attention. It was a recording of a closed-door meeting between Preston, Carter, and a third man named Damon. Damon. I vaguely remembered his name from an old internal email. A senior business executive from Helix. His voice came through the speaker, clear as day. "If you want that 6-figure year-end bonus, Preston, we need full control of the system migration. No exceptions. That legacy guy, Steven, is the biggest obstacle." None of them thought to worry about being recorded, and none of them knew I had a habit of documenting shady meetings in both text and audio. In that moment, everything became clear. I wasn't dismissed due to technical issues. I was pushed out to make room for a deal. Helix needed to clean out the infrastructure so they could install their proprietary system, forcing the hospital into full dependency on their platform. Once the transition was complete, they could freely hike prices, upsell services, and rake in millions from public healthcare budgets. I double-checked. The audio file was inside a password-protected, encrypted folder. Only I knew how to access it. In an instant, I held a puzzle piece that could expose Preston's entire scheme. That night, as the city fell quiet, I drove to Noah's house, an old friend who now worked in the legal division of a medical tech firm. We hadn't spoken in 4 years, not since Clara passed. But when I handed him the USB and said just 3 sentences, he stared at me and said, "You're sitting on a live bomb." Noah advised caution. "If Helix is this deep in, every move you make from here on has to be like a chess game." I nodded, though inside I had already chosen a path. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth out. The next day, I got a message from a former ER colleague. "Stephen, the cardiology unit just lost data access. They can't retrieve current med orders for patients. This has never happened before." Within a week of my dismissal, 4 departments ran into record access failures. One emergency case had to be transferred. The lab returned to handwritten spreadsheets. I stayed silent, didn't intervene, but each failure painted a clear picture. They had traded stability for a poorly grounded dream of innovation. Another evening, Aaron, the head pharmacist, called me, whispering like someone might overhear. "Stephen, rumor is Helix is about to lock down all patient data, including clinical analytics. Preston says a new data privacy agreement is coming next month." I asked, "Has the board been informed?" She hesitated. "Only the ones Preston invited to a strategic vision session. The others don't know anything." I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Even though I was no longer part of the organization, I still had a responsibility to the hospital I'd served for 15 years. I called Noah back, sent him the full audio file, along with the internal emails I had pulled before my access was cut. "What do you want to do?" Noah asked. "I want the board to know exactly what they signed and who's really behind all of it." 2 days later, I received a call from Monica Pierce, an independent board member I had once worked with during a medical equipment upgrade initiative. Her tone was firm, but not hostile. "I've heard the recording. We're calling an emergency meeting. But I need you there." I held my breath for a few seconds. The game had changed. I wasn't the one pushed aside anymore. I had become the only witness capable of flipping the board. No one knew what I was going to present, but I knew one thing. If the board opened their eyes that day, what they'd uncover wouldn't just be a strategic misstep. It would be a full-blown scheme to sell out a hospital system to a corporation skilled in dressing up a snake. On Monday morning, I was making coffee when my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. The first message came from Melissa, the lab tech. "Stephen, the blood sample management system won't start. We can't find the recovery manual anywhere." The second message: "Where's the auto backup config? Looks like Helix wiped the root directory by accident." The third one, short and sharp, came from Ethan in pharmacy. "We've lost access to medication data during peak hours." I stared at the screen, my hand tightening around the steaming mug. A hard-to-describe feeling welled up. Not satisfaction, not vindication. It was that old, familiar anxiety returning, this time masked as helplessness. I knew exactly what was happening. The code I had written, the data flows I had built, everything was being unraveled by people who had no clue how these pieces were connected. My severance agreement had a strict clause: no technical assistance of any kind to the former organization within 6 months. A single call, one reply email, even a helpful sentence could land me in legal trouble. I didn't respond, but I saved everything, every question, every desperate message from former colleagues, not as evidence, but as a reminder that, at one point, I truly mattered. That evening, I sat alone in front of the screen. Internal news was leaking faster than I expected. A memo from the Quality Control Department had surfaced. The 2:35 p.m. surgery was postponed because the doctor couldn't access the patient's allergy records. Below it was a handwritten note: "This is the 3rd time this week." I was no longer there, but I could clearly see the chaos unfolding. The surgery scheduling system had a time sync failure, causing overlapping operations. The auto-prescription module was inputting incorrect drug names due to incompatibility with the new database. Erin sent me a screenshot, a system error showing "connection to medication database denied. Please try again later." She added a line: "Stephen, this is getting out of control." I shut the screen off, leaned back in my chair. The room fell into stillness. I'd never felt so torn in my life. On one side was duty, 15 years of safeguarding lives with my own 2 hands. On the other was the legal agreement I had signed, back when I didn't know I was just a pawn in a calculated trade-off. 3 days later, an anonymous email landed in my personal inbox. An ER patient had to be transferred because the medical history lookup system failed. "We need you back. Only you know how it works." I didn't know who sent it, maybe a nurse, maybe a night shift doctor, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a software glitch. This was the result of erasing quietly earned knowledge, of believing technology could replace experience. Noah called me at 10 p.m. that night. I spoke with another board member. They're panicking. He paused, lowered his voice. "Rumor is Helix wants the hospital to sign an emergency support deal at triple the original cost." I asked, "What are they planning to do about the corrupted data?" Noah sighed. "They're blaming the transition process, claiming the faults are from the old system. You and I both know that's a lie." I sat quietly. They hadn't just broken what I'd built. They were ready to bend the truth to save face. The next morning, I got another call, this time from Monica Pierce's number, a board member. I didn't answer, but a message came right after. "Stephen, I need to meet, urgent. They're hiding something. I think you know exactly what." I grabbed my phone and stepped onto the porch. The April air stung my face, but my head was burning hot. I hadn't replied yet, but I knew. If I went back, even just to speak, nothing would ever be the same again. On Tuesday morning, I was reviewing a technical proposal from Northbridge Hospital when the first email from Preston Wade landed. The subject line was in all caps: urgent discussion needed, system crisis. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made a cup of espresso, sat by the window, and looked out at the backyard, where Clara had once planted lavender along the stone path. By the time I returned to my desk, 3 more emails had followed. Stephen, it'll only take 5 minutes. We need urgent support. The situation is critical. Patient care is being affected. We're willing to negotiate any terms. I didn't respond. That afternoon, the phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen. I already knew who it was. Only one person would leave a voicemail, starting with a shaky, forced voice. Stephen, I realize maybe we started off the wrong way. I muted the call and went back to reading Northbridge's system design. They weren't offering the highest salary, but they valued stability and transparency. Their chief technology officer, Linda Gomez, had sent me a note along with the proposal. We're not looking for the best resume. We're looking for someone who understands why patient data should never fall out of sync with a heartbeat. Preston's second message was longer. Helix is losing control of the system. There are unidentified security flaws. The inpatient medication coordination has gone down twice. I'm truly sorry for everything that happened, Stephen, but now isn't the time for pride. We need you. The hospital needs you. I nearly smiled. Preston had never said the word sorry since he arrived in Des Moines. Now he was trying to pull me back into the same place that had discarded me like outdated code. By evening, the doorbell rang. I stepped outside and saw Preston standing on my porch. Hair disheveled, tie loose, no driver. No Carter. Just him, holding a lukewarm Starbucks paper cup. Stephen, he started, thank you for agreeing to see me. I didn't invite him in, but I didn't shut the door either. I won't sugarcoat this, he said, his voice noticeably weaker. We're on the edge. The clinical prescription system has failed twice in the last 36 hours. The ER is back to handwriting everything. No one understands the mess Helix left behind. Everyone says, only you can fix it. I stayed silent. Then he made the offer. 6-month contract, double your previous salary, special consultant title. You won't report to anyone, just come back, retrain the team, realign the system. I sat down on the wooden chair on the porch, watching him still standing, unwilling to sit. Maybe for the first time in his life, Preston understood what it felt like to be the one without a choice. Forced to stand while negotiating the survival of a system he never truly controlled. I've already signed, I said quietly. Northbridge, I start next week. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Northbridge, the competitor up north? I nodded. They didn't call me outdated. They didn't cut me out of meetings when I warned them about potential security flaws. Preston slumped as if someone had punched him in the gut. Stephen, be realistic. You've been with Central Valley for 15 years. These are your patients, your systems. You can't just walk away. I looked him straight in the eye for the first time since I was fired. I spent my entire career working in silence so the system would run smoothly, so patients were never put at risk because of a technical glitch. But with one rushed decision, you threw all that away just to hit a budget target. You're asking me back because the fallout came too fast, not because you've actually changed. He stayed silent. I walked to the door, hand on the knob. I'm not angry, Preston. I've simply found a place where I'm respected from the start, something you've never understood. As I closed the door behind me, I heard his footsteps slowly retreating down the steps. I didn't feel relief, just calm. Sometimes, saving a system isn't about going back to fix it. It's about letting it collapse far enough for people to realize who's been holding it together all along. I received an email from Dr. Caroline Beck at 6 a.m. on Thursday. Subject, the board needs to hear the truth. Can you speak? Caroline was one of the few members of the board who kept a clear head amidst Preston's modernization frenzy. She had once chaired the neurology department and was later appointed to the board for her ability to see what spreadsheets couldn't. Real impact on patients. She attached a copy of internal meeting notes between department heads. What I read made my blood run cold. Medication orders routed to pediatric dosing, elderly patients unable to update vaccination records, and worst of all, a trauma patient's allergy record vanishing mid-surgery. Caroline wrote, "Stephen, I don't believe the system you built caused this. But to convince the board, we need your voice." I took 3 minutes to decide. In the end, I replied, "I'll come, but I'm not returning to apologize or to beg for a role. I'm coming so people can finally see what they've been blindly ignoring." The next morning, I walked into the Central Valley Medical Center boardroom for the first time in nearly 2 months. No longer in the familiar blue shirt of the IT staff, this time in a black suit, gray tie, and with a laptop in hand containing the full operational history of the system, over 15 years. The room was unusually quiet as I entered. Preston sat across from me, face pale. Carter lingered near the projector, without the swagger of the man who'd once terminated me in a single sentence. Dr. Beck opened the meeting. "We're here because the system is failing. We need to reassess the entire transition to the Helix platform." She turned to me. "Stephen, please begin." I connected my laptop, projecting a 200-page document onto the screen. The complete architecture of the legacy system, including all custom integrations. I pointed to the diagrams, each arrow an annotation. "This is the link between the cardiology system and the medication order module, manually reprogrammed after the original vendor ceased operations in 2014. I flipped to the next page, and this is the emergency disconnect framework designed to protect patient data during power outages. Helix had no idea this existed because it's not shown on the main dashboard. A few members started taking notes. Preston sat motionless, staring at the table. I moved to the comparison section. Helix performs well in hospitals built from the ground up with modern infrastructure. Here's a list of 11 hospitals where it's been successfully implemented. Please focus on the year established column. I enlarged the chart. All the facilities were built after 2018 with no legacy systems to integrate. Central Valley, in contrast, has 17 software platforms running concurrently. 7 of them are proprietary, developed by the previous in-house team. I highlighted a key line. Forcing Helix onto an incompatible structure is like putting a jet engine in a school bus. Expensive, unnecessary, and potentially fatal if it spirals out of control. Carter jumped in, voice shaky. "We were told the old system failed to meet data security standards." I didn't argue. Instead, I played a video clip from the most recent security audit. The auditor's voice rang out. The system achieved a security compliance score of 99.96%, exceeding federal standards. The entire room fell silent. I lowered my voice. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to defend a system that once saved thousands of lives. A system labeled obsolete simply because it didn't serve short-term financial interests." Dr. Beck sat upright, locking eyes with Preston. "Did you know about the incompatibilities before presenting Helix to the board?" Preston stammered, then blamed it on technical advisors. But the board's expressions had shifted. I could tell they saw through it now. I scanned the room one last time. "I don't need to come back. I just want everyone to understand that what you threw away wasn't just a person. It was an entire ecosystem you'd relied on for years." I closed my laptop and walked out, past the heavy gazes that followed me. Behind me, Dr. Beck called out, "Thank you for coming back, even once. We needed that more than you know." I didn't reply, but deep down I knew the pin had been pulled, and this time, the explosion wouldn't come from fire, it would come from the truth. The emergency meeting lasted more than 3 hours. No shouting matches or slammed fists like in the movies. Just quiet exchanges of glances, steady nods, as each puzzle piece finally clicked into place. When Dr. Caroline Beck wrapped up the discussion, she said only one thing: "We trusted the wrong people." The vote was confidential, but the result announced immediately. 9 out of 11 members voted to terminate the partnership with Helix Solutions, effective immediately. Preston Wade was asked to resign within 24 hours. An internal memo was drafted and sent the same day, stating the reason clearly: lack of transparency in critical technical decision-making, leading to severe clinical impact. I wasn't there when Preston packed up his office, but I heard he left without saying a word. Only Carter remained. Once smug when I handed over my badge, now standing awkwardly by the elevator, holding a helix binder with nowhere to take it. That afternoon, Caroline called me into a small side room. She sat seriously, but with a faint smile. "Stephen, the board has an official offer for you. Chief Technology Officer of Central Valley. We need someone who not only understands the system, but understands its true value." I didn't answer right away. I had one condition: full authority to rebuild the technical team and restore the legacy infrastructure at a safe pace. No outside consultants, no third parties. Caroline agreed without hesitation. When I returned to the data center, the entire room reeked of scorched plastic from an overloaded power unit. 2 main servers had corrupted partitions. 1 backup drive was improperly encrypted. There was no quick fix. We had to start from scratch. I called 3 people first: Ethan from pharmacy, Melissa from lab, and Marcus, a former engineer I'd worked with 3 years ago, now freelancing out of Denver. They arrived within a day, carrying laptops, old notebooks, and most importantly, trust. We separated each system cluster, used backup images I had stored privately from 6 months prior, and rerouted each data path. A single typo in a config file could erase the ultrasound to patient record link, but Melissa double-checked every data field, Ethan verified prescriptions, and Marcus rebuilt the internal DNS overnight. Twice, without sleep. I didn't just restore what had been broken. I upgraded. Layered the security architecture, isolated sensitive modules from shared traffic, rewrote the auto-backup algorithms to eliminate reliance on manual schedules. With every component that came back online, I submitted a report to the board. Short, plain, and brutally honest. After 3 weeks, over 87% of the system was restored. 6 departments were fully operational again. No more paper forms. Patients no longer waited 2 hours for their prescriptions. But I wasn't satisfied. I wanted the new team to understand why every line of code mattered, why one misplaced command could have consequences no one foresaw. I began holding internal training every Thursday night. No PowerPoint, just real incidents. This was when a server crashed due to a date formatting mismatch. This is why I never allowed direct API access from the insurance system to patient records without a filter layer. Over time, I wasn't just the guy who kept the system running. I became the person reshaping how the entire hospital viewed technology. On Monday morning, I got a message from Caroline. This week's internal bulletin will officially announce Stephen Walsh, Chief Information Officer. I looked up at the screen displaying the system's live diagram, with error rates below 0.01%. But I didn't look long. Too many tasks still needed checking. Too many connections still needed reinforcement before I could think of pausing, even for a moment. 8 weeks after the system was fully restored, I stood on a small stage behind Central Valley Hospital's main auditorium. The event was simply titled Infrastructure Appreciation Day, but the way people sat quietly, eyes fixed on me, made the moment feel heavier than any quarterly meeting I'd attended before. Dr. Caroline Beck stepped up to the podium, her voice firm but gentle. Today, we're not just honoring someone for technical ability, we're recognizing a philosophy, a way of viewing healthcare technology not as a tool, but as the second heartbeat of this hospital. I was invited to the stage to the sound of thunderous applause. For the first time in 15 years, my name was called out amid claps that honored the person, not just a successful patch or a surgery that went uninterrupted. There were no flashy titles, no shiny medals, just a small wooden plaque engraved with the words, "In recognition of foundational contributions to healthcare technology safety." As I stepped down, Marcus shook my hand firmly. "You're no longer the shadow behind the server, Stephen." Melissa smiled and slipped me a handwritten card. "If the system is the backbone, you're the one who kept it straight." That night, I sat alone in my new office, the one that used to be Carter's, now renamed. On the desk was the master plan for the 5-year roadmap. Not to tear everything down, but to build on the foundations that had already proven effective. I didn't need to chase after digital transformation at all costs. We would modernize gradually, in a way that preserved the hospital's hard-earned stability. Instead of replacing the entire system, I focused on layering in flexible integrations. I called it controlled modernization. Whenever an upgrade was completed, I had the tech team write internal guides, not for engineers, but for doctors, nurses, and admin staff, anyone who might be affected by a small system change. I wanted everyone to understand that technology should never be a source of worry. It should stand behind them like an invisible teammate. I also began joining strategic planning meetings, places where I used to be called in only when something broke. At first, some people were still uneasy when I pointed out that a new feature might cost doctors an extra 10 seconds to access a file, but they eventually understood that those 10 seconds could mean the difference between a timely diagnosis and an irreversible error. Caroline invited me to join the state-level tech evaluation committee. I declined the permanent role but offered to lead a workshop for regional hospitals on seamless upgrade strategies. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but after everything, I wanted something more lasting than a new title. I wanted knowledge to be passed on. No one mentioned Preston anymore. Helix quietly withdrew from the region after 2 consecutive federal audits. I wasn't happy, I just felt balance returning. One late weekend afternoon, I sat on my porch holding an old photo of Clara and me in front of the hospital, back when she was still healthy. I thought about the long stretch of time I'd worked in silence, the nameless overnight shifts, the times I believed my efforts would go unseen forever. But now, I know, not everything needs a battle to be recognized. Sometimes if you stay grounded in what's right, the truth eventually finds its voice. As the sunlight stretched across the rooftops, my phone lit up with a message from the team. Version 3.5 update completed safely, no errors. I closed the laptop, took a sip of cold coffee, and walked back inside. Monday morning's meeting would begin with plans for a smart diagnostics data platform built on principles that once were labeled outdated. But this time, everyone was ready to listen from the start. Stephen's story is living proof that experience never becomes obsolete when matched with dedication. In an age where buzzwords like digital transformation and disruptive innovation are hailed as saviors, he reminded us that true value lies in stability, deep understanding, and quiet loyalty. Stephen didn't seek revenge or spotlight. He simply wanted to be heard and respected for the legacy he had quietly built over decades. What do you think of Stephen's decision? Should he have gone back or continued down his new path? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about life and family.